So I asked my partner, and I said, hey, David, is there a pool around here? And you'd think I'd know every pool in the United States after doing it for so many years, but I'd never really been in South Florida, and I'd been like in Mission Bay, but not in the area that we're in Coral Springs. And he said, yeah, Darra, there's this great Olympic-sized pool. Now, I didn't know how much he knew about swimming, but the first thought that went in my head is when you go to a hotel, it's an Olympic-sized pool, it's like the size of the stage, and that was kind of what I thought I was going to expect when he told me where to go. But I hop in the car, and I rush over to this Coral Springs swim complex, and I walk in, and sure enough, there's this beautiful 50-meter pool, there's a beautiful 25-meter by 25-yard pool, a diving well, a kids pool. And I was like, wow, this is heaven. And it's like 80 degrees outside, and I'm like, this is where I want to swim. And I go into the swim office, and there's an older woman in there, and I said, excuse me, I was just wondering, what kind of swim programs you have. So she looked at me and she said, have you ever swum before? And I said, yeah, a little bit, and she said, well, what kind of program are you looking for? And I said, I don't know. I mean, maybe swimming with the kids. And I said that, and she looked at me like I was just, what are you talking about, swimming with kids, you look old. And I said, or, swimming with the masters. And she'd tell you what, there's some brochures over here, and why don't you look at the brochures and you could decide, what you want to swim. I was like, all right, great. And so I'm looking, and I can't decide. I mean, there's so many different programs. And she said, well, you ever been in any meets? And I'm like, yeah, I've been in a couple meets, And she said, well, have you done anything like that you can write about and write down? And you can, if you do that, maybe you can just tell me your accomplishments if you have any, and I can give it to the coach, and he can decide what group you're in. I was like, okay, 4 Olympic Games, 9 Olympic medals, and going on. And I'm like, well, do I just hand this to her and make her feel bad? I'm like, so I fold the paper and I hand it to her, and she's like, oh, wait a minute, you didn't put your name on here. Can you put your name and number, please? And I'm like, sure. And so I put that in there and hand it back. And a couple hours later, the coach calls me, and he said, I never met him. I'd see him on the deck a lot, but his name's Michael Loberg, and I never met him. And this deep German voice, he said, how come you didn't tell her who you were? And I said, well, I don't know. I just don't want anyone to assume they should know who I am. And so he said, come to the pool, and I can show you around. You can decide if you want to swim. I'm like, great. So I come back to the pool, and there's a gym that I didn't see when I was there and some other things. And we're walking around, and I didn't tell him I was pregnant. I didn't start showing until I was about 4.5 months along, and so I'm walking around thinking he's gonna say, hey, why don't you come swim with the kids, and my group, and my national group. And I think I was fast enough to swim with them, and so we're walking along, and everything's, oh, the Masters team's great. Oh, I have to introduce you to the Masters coach. Masters this, Masters that. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm training with the Masters team. And so he basically never wanted me to swim in his group. And I ended up starting to train with the Masters team. And it was really a lot of fun. They're kind of laid back and enjoy swimming and don't put too much pressure on themselves, but have fun. And you don't, if you miss a set or miss something in the workout, the coach isn't going to yell at you because you're older than the coach. So, it was a lot of fun. And so, I don't know, I was about 6 months along. And the one thing I did tell my coach is I let him know that I was pregnant. Chris Jackson was his name. And I let him know I was pregnant. And he goes, well, what does the doctor say? I said, the doctor said, this is your parameter. If you have a hard time breathing while you're training, that means the baby will have a hard time breathing. So just use that as, your indicator. I said, okay, great. So about 6 months along, I'm in the pool, and I start doing this set, and I look over, and this middle-aged man is racing me. And I'm like, what is he doing? I'm 6 months pregnant. Does he not see what's going on here? And he didn't care. He's like, oh, she's Olympian. I'm just going to be an Olympian, not a 6-month pregnant Olympian. It's an Olympian. So I found myself starting to race this guy. And I'm like, I'm not letting a middle-aged man beat me. And I kind of forgot I'm middle-aged also, but I'm like, I'm just not letting a man beat me. And I start racing this guy. And the coach stops. He's like, what are you doing? Don't you remember what your doctor said? I'm like, I can't help it. This guy's racing me. I can't let him beat me, And he's like, tell you what. He said, go 30 seconds behind and let him go, and then you'll be okay. I said, okay. So the guy takes off. I wait 30 seconds, and I go, and I'm like, okay, where is he? Am I catching up, And I'm like, I can't do this. This is really bad. And it took so long to get pregnant that I decided not to swim with the team anymore, and decided to just sort of train on my own, and the coach would give me some workouts. And so about 1 week before I'm supposed to deliver, the head coach, Michael, who didn't want me swimming with his group, comes up to me. God bless you, by the way. And says, Darra, I need to ask you a favor. And I'm like, sure. Now, you can understand, this whole entire time that I'm training, even though that little competitive thing came out in me with trying to beat this middle-aged man, I really had no intentions of getting back into swimming again. It wasn't in my head. In my head was I was going to have a beautiful daughter and be a mom and take care of her. And so a week before I was supposed to deliver, Michael comes up to me and he says, Darra, I really need to ask you a favor. I'm like, sure, what is it? And he said, well, we have this meet in a month here at this pool, and it's a master's meet, and I was wondering if you just wouldn't mind asking your doctor if you can swim. Now I'm looking down at my 9-month belly, and I'm looking at my coach, and I'm like, this is such a guy thing to ask. Like, are you serious? And he's like, sure, I'm sure your doctor wouldn't mind. I'm like, yeah, I'll be sure to ask him on my next visit. And the reason why he wanted me to do that is because he wanted to get more publicity for the meet, and if I swam in it, they would have an article in the paper and generate more publicity, and more people would go to the meet. So that whole week that I was supposed to wait to deliver, I'd go to the doctor, and I never had the nerve to ask him. And so I go in the hospital, I have my beautiful daughter, I'm so excited, she's on my lap, and I don't know if this is the drugs talking now or anything, but the doctor comes up to me and congratulates me, and he starts to leave, and I grab his lab coat. I'm like, wait a minute, Dr. Zappa. And he's like, what? I said, I have a meet in 3 weeks. You don't mind if I swim in it, do you? And he looked at me and he's like, Darra, he said, you can't do anything aerobically for 6 weeks. He says, you can go to the gym tomorrow if you'd like, which I doubt you're going to want to. And he was right. But you cannot go do anything aerobically. And I was like, okay, And so it takes about a week and a half, and I'm finally sort of feeling a little good again. And the coach is still calling me, asking me if I had asked my doctor, and I already told him what the answer was. And so I go to the gym, and I'm feeling kind of good, and I start doing some tricep extensions, and out the side of my eye, I see this guy who looks familiar. I kind of turn my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my doctor. And he's kind of a jokester, so even though he said I could go the next day and go to the weight room, I didn't know if he was kidding or not, so I'm like, oh gosh. And I turn my head and I keep doing it, and it was too late, he already saw me, he comes walking over. He's like, so, DT, I see you at the gym. I said, you said I can go the next day. He's like, yeah, I know. And start doing a little small talk, and then after we chatted a little bit, I said, I have this meet in a week and a half, and I'm very persistent. And I said, you don't mind if I swim in it, do you? And he finally looked at me, he's like, Darra, he's like, go ahead and swim in it. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. He goes, just be careful, but just go ahead and swim in it. He goes, us doctors, we always say 6 weeks, we really don't know. I'm like, great. And before he could say anything else, I was like out of there. I'm like, bye, and I took off, and I raced home, and I put my swimsuit on, and I just hired someone to watch Tessa for a few hours so I can go work out. And I go to the pool, and I do a little workout, and sure enough, I go to this meet 3 weeks post-pregnancy, and I did okay. It was fun, and it was kind of hard to get in the suit, and I made sure I breastfed, so I was nice and light in the water before I swam, and I had a really good time. Still no intentions of getting back and training again. And then my partner, who kind of got back into swimming when I started training, or started swimming when I was pregnant, he's like, Darra, there's a great meet in about 2.5 months. Why don't we go to it? And I said, sure. So I trained about 3 days a week. Now my hardest thing to do when I was training was trying to figure out how to find a balance between being a good parent and working or doing what you love to do. And I sort of considered swimming a little bit of a job, but also fun. And I really look to working parents out there for inspiration on how to do that, because there's definitely a lot of guilt that you feel at first. And I'll never forget going to my first little training session, and I'd call the nanny after about 10 minutes, how's she doing? Is she go to the bathroom? Is she asleep? Is she awake? Is she burping? What's she doing? And I found like 10 minutes later, I get out and ask the same question, and finally after about a week of that, she just didn't even answer the phone, and I kind of got used to doing that, and I just realized that you still have to have a life also, even though you're there for your kids, and like I said, I really look to working parents out there as my inspiration of how to find a good balance for what's best for me and for my daughter. And so I go to this meet out in California, and it's called the Masters World Championships, and I've never seen so many swimmers in my life. I mean, I've been to a lot of kids' meets before, but I'd never seen so many swimmers in my life. They actually had to use 2 Olympic-sized pools to be able to fit everyone in this meet. And I went and I swam, and I did really well. I actually ended up qualifying for the Olympic trials, and people started coming up to me and they're like, God, it'd be great to see a 40-year-old in the Olympics. I'm like, great, who's going? And who are we cheering on? And they're like, you? I'm like, me? I go, I'm not going to the Olympics. I always had a kid. And they're like, no, it'd be great. We'd cheer on a 40-year-old, someone our age. It'd be so much fun. And there were about 5,000 swimmers at this meet, and by the end of the meet, about 4,999 came up to me and said, you need to go for the Olympic Games. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And that was it. It wasn't like I thought about it over a long period of time. I was just getting, it was like peer pressure, I guess. These older